The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a small device on the desk. A man sat alone, staring intently at the tiny particles dancing inside the glass chamber. His fingers hovered above the controls, trembling slightly. He had spent months trying to make this experiment work, following every guide, every technique, every promise that someone, somewhere, had discovered the secret to controlling reality itself, yet nothing happened. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes, and looked around the quiet room. The shadows on the walls seemed alive, shifting and twisting as if mocking him. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to his struggle, but inside, time felt suspended. Each second heavy with expectation and frustration. He whispered to himself, "Why isn't it working? Why can't I make it happen?" Memories of his past attempts flashed before him, failed experiments, notes covered in scribbles. Diagrams had made sense on paper, but failed in practice. He had thought he was close, thought he understood the rules, but every time, the outcome slipped away, like water through his fingers. The more he tried to control it, the more distant it became. He picked up a small notebook, its pages filled with sketches of particles, waves, and strange symbols. A reminder of the nights he had spent studying, researching, seeking answers. Yet the answer remained elusive. He had read about the observer effect, a mysterious principle in quantum physics that suggested simply watching could change reality. The idea fascinated him, teased him, and tormented him all at once. The narrator's voice cut through the silence, calm but deep. He had been told that observation could shape reality, that consciousness itself could influence the smallest elements of the universe. Yet here he was, staring, waiting, failing, and wondering why it wasn't working for him. He leaned forward again, eyes fixed on the particles, willing them to move differently, to respond to his focus. But they danced on, indifferent, as if mocking his desire for control. Frustration rose in his chest, a tight knot that refused to loosen. He realized that perhaps the problem was not with the experiment, not with the science, but with something deeper, something hidden within himself. Outside, a faint wind rattled the window pane. The city lights flickered briefly, and for a moment, he felt a strange sensation, as if the room itself was alive, watching him back. He shivered and whispered, "Am I the observer, or am I the observed?" The question lingered in the air, heavy, unanswerable. His mind raced through the theories he had learned, the stories of others who had supposedly harnessed the observer effect effortlessly, how they could influence reality simply by being aware, by letting go. He had tried the same, but each attempt ended in disappointment. The more he chased it, the more it slipped away. A sudden thought struck him, sharp and electric. What if the secret isn't in controlling the particles? What if it's in how I exist while observing? The idea both terrified and fascinated him, a possibility that changed everything he thought he knew. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the room feeling both immense and intimate, as if the boundaries between himself and the experiment were dissolving. The narrator's voice returned, soft but insistent. He had been searching outside, for techniques, for methods, for results, but the answer lay inside, hidden, waiting, beyond expectation, beyond fear, beyond control. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and for the first time, allowed himself to simply be. No judgment, no expectation, no desire to force the outcome. Only observation, pure and open. The particles continued their dance, but he felt something shift, a subtle change, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. And in that quiet moment, he realized that the journey had just begun. The observer effect was not a trick, not a tool, but a mirror, reflecting the very nature of consciousness itself. The question remained, lingering in the shadows. Will he see it? Will he finally understand? Or will it remain just out of reach, as it always had? After that quiet, electric moment, the man opened his eyes and leaned closer to the particles. The glow of the device reflected in his wide, curious eyes. The narrator's voice returned, calm and steady. What he was witnessing was not just random motion, not mere science alone. This was the observer effect, a phenomenon where simply observing something can change its behavior. He remembered the first time he had heard about it, a strange, almost unbelievable idea, that, at the quantum level, reality itself is not fixed, that tiny particles could exist in multiple states at once, and only reveal a definite state when observed. It sounded like magic, or perhaps a trick of the mind, yet scientists had proven it in countless experiments. The narrator continued. Imagine throwing a pebble into a pond and then watching the ripples carefully, noticing every small wave, every reflection. In that act of observing, you change how you interact with the water. At the quantum scale, this is exactly what happens. Except it is invisible to the naked eye. He thought about electrons, photons, tiny building blocks of the universe that seemed to respond to observation, changing their paths as if they knew they were being watched. It was not merely seeing, it was participation, a subtle, mysterious connection between consciousness and matter. In the room, he moved his hand slightly, as if to test it again, yet he knew that trying too hard often failed. The effect required something beyond technique, beyond control. It required presence, awareness, and perhaps even surrender. It was as if reality itself was waiting for him to understand, not to manipulate, he thought. The narrator's voice paused, letting the idea sink in. For centuries, scientists and philosophers have debated what this means. Is consciousness shaping reality, or is reality shaping consciousness? Does the act of observation merely reveal what exists, or does it participate in creating it? He picked up a small book, pages worn from study, filled with diagrams showing particle experiments, wave patterns, and strange quantum graphs. As he traced a line with his finger, he realized the observer effect was not simple. It was not a single rule or trick. It was a doorway, a glimpse into the nature of reality itself. The narrator spoke again, soft but insistent. Many people try to harness it, to bend reality with their minds, but most fail, not because the principle is false, but because they misunderstand what it asks of them. It is not about control. It is about awareness, attention, and letting go of expectation. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, imagining the particles not as things to control, but as partners in a quiet dance, the subtle vibrations of the universe responding to him as much as he responded to them. He felt a shiver of recognition, something deep and ancient stirring within him. The narrator concluded this part with a hint of mystery. The observer effect is not a magic trick, nor a simple law. It is a mirror, reflecting your consciousness back to you, revealing what you are, how you perceive, and what you are ready to see. The question is, are you ready to look? He opened his eyes again, the particles moving as before, but now he felt differently, connected, curious, aware that something had shifted inside him, a new understanding waiting to unfold, a journey that would take him far beyond simple observation into the heart of reality itself. As he sat there, watching the particles move in their quiet, unpredictable dance, he began to sense a pattern, not in the particles themselves, but in himself. The narrator's voice cut through the stillness. He had been looking outside, seeking results, trying to force reality to bend to his will, but the real barrier had always been within him. He remembered the countless failed attempts, the frustration, the nights spent staring at diagrams and notes, following every method he could find. Yet the results never came. The observer effect seemed just beyond his reach, and at first, he thought it was the particles, the tools, or the experiment that was flawed. The narrator continued. But the problem was never the experiment. It was the observer. It was how he thought, how he expected, and how he feared. He leaned back, recalling moments when hope had turned to anxiety, when expectation had hardened into a kind of tension that he didn't notice until it blocked his focus completely. Each time he tried to control the outcome, the effect slipped further away. It was like reaching for a reflection in water. The harder he grabbed, the more it rippled and vanished, he thought. A subtle realization began to emerge, almost like a whisper in the mind, that his thoughts, his judgments, and even his desire to succeed were creating invisible walls between him and the particles. Could it be that the observer effect wasn't failing, but he was? The narrator explained, most people fail not because the principle is wrong, but because their minds are filled with noise, doubt, expectation, fear, and the constant need to control. Observation requires surrender, a quiet openness, a willingness to simply be present without demanding results. He closed his eyes and remembered a teacher once saying, "You cannot see what is if you are too busy trying to change it." The words echoed in his mind, slowly connecting to all the failed experiments, the scribbled notes, the late nights spent chasing control. He opened his eyes again, staring at the particles, and for a moment, he simply watched, without wanting, without judgment, without expectation. He realized how rare this state truly was, how difficult it was for most observers to simply exist alongside reality. He opened his eyes again, staring at the particles, and for a moment, he simply watched, without wanting, without judgment, without expectation. He realized how rare this state truly was, how difficult it was for most observers to simply exist alongside reality. The narrator's voice grew softer, drawing the audience in. The hidden barrier is subtle, almost invisible. It hides within your mind, your beliefs, and your resistance to what is. Only by noticing it and letting it go can the observer effect reveal its true power. He felt a shiver run through him, a mixture of awe and fear, as if he had glimpsed a secret door, a threshold into something far greater than experiments, formulas, or techniques. The barrier was not external, it was internal, a reflection of his own consciousness, waiting for him to understand. He leaned forward, hands resting gently on the desk, watching the particles without interference, sensing that something fundamental was shifting within him. The narrator concluded with a question that hung in the air. What if every failure, every frustration, every moment you felt powerless was simply a mirror showing you the walls within your own mind? Would you dare to look? And in that moment, he felt the tiniest hint of change, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. A whisper of possibility that something extraordinary could begin if he learned to observe without the weight of expectation. As he continued to watch, the man began to feel a strange connection, not just to the particles, but to the room, the air, the faint hum of electricity running through the walls. The narrator's voice returned, calm and reflective. He was beginning to sense what few ever notice, that consciousness is not separate from reality. It is woven into it, like threads in a vast, invisible tapestry. He thought about everyday moments he had taken for granted, how a glance, a thought, or a feeling could subtly influence events around him. A smile might brighten someone's day, a word could shift the course of a conversation. Perhaps the universe was doing the same, responding to observation, intention, and awareness in ways that science could only begin to measure. He wondered, the narrator explained, at the quantum level, experiments have shown that particles respond to observation, collapsing possibilities into a single reality. But this is only the surface. What if the same principle extends to our lives, our choices, our perception of what is possible? He leaned back, eyes wide, imagining the world as an intricate dance of consciousness and matter, where observing, noticing, and being aware were acts of participation, not mere passive witnessing. The boundaries between himself and the universe felt thinner, almost imperceptible. The narrator continued, reality is not fixed. It is shaped by attention, perception, and presence. The act of observing is not just seeing, it is co-creating, a subtle interplay between what is and what you are aware of. He recalled moments when intuition had guided him, small coincidences that seemed impossible, insights that arrived without effort, and he began to wonder if these were glimpses of the same principle at work. The observer effect in action in daily life, not just in experiments. The narrator's voice drew the audience closer. Many fail to notice because they are caught in expectation, desire, or fear. Consciousness is subtle, quiet, and demands patience. Only when the mind becomes still can the hidden patterns of reality emerge. He closed his eyes again and took a slow breath, imagining himself as part of a larger dance, a network of awareness that extended beyond the room, beyond the city, beyond what he could see. He felt a shift, a gentle alignment, a feeling that observation was no longer effortful, but natural. The narrator added, this is the key most overlook. Consciousness shapes reality not through force, but through awareness, through presence, through the willingness to simply notice without judgment. Observation is a conversation, not a command. He opened his eyes, and the particles seemed to move with a subtle grace, almost as if acknowledging him. He felt a thrill of understanding, a taste of the principle that had eluded him for so long. The room, the particles, and he were no longer separate. The narrator concluded this part with a thought-provoking question. If consciousness shapes reality in this way, how much of your life, your world, and your experience has been waiting quietly for you to truly observe? Are you ready to see it unfold? And in that moment, the man felt both small and infinite, part of a mysterious, living reality. where observation was not just watching, but participating, a doorway opening to deeper understanding, curiosity, and wonder. The man sat quietly, feeling a subtle shift in his awareness. The narrator's voice returned, calm and guiding. Now that he had begun to sense the connection between observation and reality, he needed to understand how to move from theory to practice, how to allow the observer effect to truly work. He remembered the times he had tried to force outcomes, to will results into existence, and how it had always failed. The narrator explained, "The secret is not in forcing, controlling, or expecting. It is in aligning, noticing, and letting go. Observation works when the mind is present, still, and open." He reached for the notebook on his desk and began writing simple steps, as if giving advice to himself. Step 1. Release the need to control. Step 2. Focus attention without judgment. Step 3. Be aware of thoughts and expectations, but do not cling to them, he whispered. Feeling the truth in each word, the narrator added, "Many people try to use the observer effect as a tool, but it is not a tool, it is a reflection. What you observe in reality mirrors what you carry within. The more clarity and presence you bring, the more aligned the results become." He looked at the particles again, noticing how subtle shifts in his attention seemed to create gentle, almost imperceptible changes in their behavior. Not dramatic, but meaningful. It is not about forcing the world to bend, it is about moving with it, participating rather than pushing. He realized. The narrator continued, "Even small actions reveal the principle. Set intentions clearly, watch without attachment, respond without fear." The observer effect begins to show itself not in grand experiments, but in the small moments where awareness meets reality. He thought about everyday life, conversations, decisions, choices, and understood that observation is everywhere. Not just in a lab, a glance, a thought, or a feeling can subtly influence the outcome. "By being present, I can notice the hidden currents of reality," he whispered, feeling both awe and humility. The narrator spoke again, drawing the audience in. "Practical breakthroughs come when you stop chasing results and start noticing. The mind becomes a clear lens, consciousness a gentle touch, and reality responds. It is simple, but it requires patience, awareness, and surrender." He closed his eyes and breathed slowly, imagining his life as a series of experiments where each observation was a choice to participate consciously. He felt a thrill, a spark of understanding, that the observer effect was not about power, but about harmony, connection, and presence. The narrator concluded this part with a subtle challenge. You do not need to master quantum physics. You do not need complex techniques. You need only awareness, clarity, and the willingness to observe without expectation. Begin with yourself, and the universe will reflect back what you are ready to see. He opened his eyes, feeling a quiet excitement, knowing that understanding alone was not enough. It had to be lived, experienced, practiced, a journey that would continue far beyond this moment. And in that quiet room, with particles moving softly under his gaze, he realized that every moment was an opportunity, every glance a chance to participate in the dance of reality. If only he chose to observe consciously. The man leaned back in his chair, the soft glow of the particles reflecting in his eyes. He had spent months seeking control, chasing results. Yet now he understood that the journey was never about forcing reality. The narrator's voice returned, calm, deep, and mesmerizing. He had learned the secret that most seekers never see. The observer effect is not a tool to bend reality. It is a mirror reflecting the state of your own consciousness. He thought about the countless times he had felt frustration, failure, or doubt, and suddenly those moments seemed less like obstacles and more like teachers, subtle guides showing him where his mind had been closed, where expectation had blocked observation, where fear had created distance from the very thing he wished to influence. The narrator continued, reality, consciousness, and awareness are intertwined. What you perceive, how you observe, and who you are in the act of observing shapes the world around you. Every moment becomes a reflection of your inner state. He looked around the room, at the quiet particles, the glowing instruments, and even the shadows themselves, and he realized that nothing was truly separate, that the act of observing was a conversation with reality, a gentle interplay between attention, awareness, and existence itself. The narrator added, The key is not knowledge alone, not techniques or tricks. It is presence, clarity, and surrender. To truly harness the observer effect, one must first observe oneself without judgment, without expectation, and without fear. He closed his eyes and took a slow, deep breath, feeling a sense of calm power, a sense that the universe was not something outside a control, but a partner in a dance, a living, responsive reality waiting for his conscious participation.